As easy as it would be for me to praise Austin, Texas, because fact of the matter is I love living here, and I would argue a majority of other people love living here. You know, you hear more about people coming to Austin than leaving Austin, right? In spite of that, it does have its fair share of cons. And so as we approach the summer, if you are someone who's considering perhaps relocating here in between school years for your kids or something of that nature, in this video we are going to talk about its drawbacks and its imperfections. And so if that's the information you're after, stay tuned. Hey again, everybody, this is Frank with the Living in Austin group now at eXp Realty. Every week we put out new content about living in Austin, Texas, the good and the bad. So consider subscribing if you haven't already and ring that little bell to get notified whenever we put out a new video. In addition to that, we love the reach outs we get now all the time from people just like you in need of our help when relocating to Austin, Texas. So keep them coming, don't hesitate, whether you're 9 days away or 90, reach out to our team, whether you shoot us a text, send us an email, give us a call any day of the week, any time of day. So yes, in this video, we are going to be talking about some of the cons or the downsides of living in Austin, Texas. And if nothing else, at least some things that you should keep in mind, because as mentioned, people love living in Austin, Texas, but like anywhere else in the country, it's not going to be perfect. And a lot of people don't like to talk about the imperfections. They like to talk about how great it is, and I don't blame them. However, on this channel, we like to keep it brutally honest. And so what inspired this video is I was recently reading an article of best places to live, and those rankings change each and every year. And so in the past year, Austin, Texas was ranked number 5 in the entire country. And from year to now, it has dropped from number 5 to number 13. And I would suspect that some of the things that we're going to cover in this video are perhaps why, or contribute to why that is, and why Austin, Texas, even though people are not going to stop coming here, that's for sure. People are going to flock here regardless of its ranking and best cities to live, of course. But yes, imperfect nonetheless, especially as people are now focusing more on Austin, looking at it more closely, paying more attention, and seeing perhaps imperfections that were already there, or because of its growth, imperfections that are increasing. And by the way, pardon this new setup if you are a longtime subscriber. Ironically, I have been in the process of relocating myself, and so I'm trying to put together this makeshift studio and just kind of get settled in the new place. And so pardon the change of scenery, but let's get to it. Okay, now for starters, let's talk people. That's what I wrote down for the first point. And what I mean by people is more people, even more people than last year, than the year before. I mean, as mentioned, it is, despite its dropping rankings in the best cities to live, it is still nonetheless going to be one of the top relocation hotspots in the country for quite a long time, if I had to estimate, because all these companies that have already come here are making room for even more companies that will continue to come here. And so that is a major talking point among local Austinites. But what more people looks like, for example, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, is panhandlers, is traffic, is tents, and things that are common in a lot of different places, yes. However, these are things that did not used to be in Austin, even 3 years ago, even 5 years ago. This stuff is happening very quickly. So for example, traffic. Yeah, we're always going to have traffic anywhere you live. However, what I've observed in Austin, Texas is even if you're not in the city, which is a given, you're going to have traffic in a city. Even if you're on the outskirts, even if you're, say, in Round Rock, Texas, even if you are, say, in Cedar Park, Texas, or North Austin, or places that are not within the city limits, that are not an urban setting, traffic that didn't used to exist now exists. And it doesn't just start at 4 or 5 o'clock like a lot of places. These are places that used to have completely empty roads most times of the day that now by 2 or 3 p.m., sometimes even before 2, are already getting backed up. Not with wrecks, not with construction, just traffic, because simply put, mathematically, there are more people now than there used to be. And Austin, yes, there's a lot of places that are expanding and growing, but Austin itself, the greater Austin area, isn't necessarily huge. That's going to continue to grow, yes, as Liberty Hill expands, places northeast, south, and west. However, as it currently stands, it's not like a Houston. It's not like a Dallas. It's not this gigantic place where tons and tons of people can spread out. I think we're going to find that as it expands again, as I mentioned. However, as it currently stands, Leander's only so big, Georgetown's only so big, Round Rock's only so big, Buda, Kyle, and so you're going to see traffic get worse. In addition to that, something that really has been an issue here lately have been the tents. So much so that people are like, what are we gonna do about this? And then it gets politically messy and people pick sides, and I'm not a big fan of all that anyway. But tents are becoming a big thing, and not so much downtown. Again, as I mentioned, places near suburbia, places that I grew up outside of Austin, Texas, now you're seeing tents under overpasses. It's not even in an urban setting anymore. It's not restricted to that. I also wrote panhandlers, and that's something that that's increasing too. That's coming with the tents, that's coming with the traffic. And again, in places that it didn't used to be. In safe Cedar Park or safe Round Rock or safe Pflugerville, you're going to start seeing people by your local HEB, by your local Walmart with signs asking for money coming to your window. Not excessively so, but it's certainly there when it didn't used to be, which makes it stand out even more, as opposed to already being used to it. And so lastly, on the subject of even more people, I would say that on the note of me recently relocating, I was between two spots. One of them was in the heart of downtown Austin on West 5th. It was a perfect area. It's close to everything, great walkability, especially for my corgi. And I was really considering that. But being in real estate and spending time downtown and helping people and seeing their experiences, I realized it just wasn't right for me. And granted, I'll admit I'm more of a John Denver type anyway. I like to just chill with nature, chill with my dog, sip my coffee. That kind of thing is more my speed, but don't get me wrong, I was very tempted to go downtown. Well, it turns out I decided to go in the opposite direction and get a place that is secluded, quiet, surrounded by nature in North Austin. And so that's worked out for me. I can't say I regret it, is what I'm trying to say. And that's subjective, of course, but that should tell you that even as tempting as it would be to be beautifully located in the heart of this great city of Austin, Texas, even I was like, I'm just gonna go to the outskirts, and whenever I want to dabble in the city, I can make the drive. That way I'm not stuck there. So to each their own, everyone's different, but that's something that I've observed is one of the reasons why Austin, Texas is seemingly going downhill, even though it's slated to grow a whole lot more. Moving right along, we're going to piggyback on the subject of the people and really naturally segue to the subject of growth. And I'm not really going to get into a lot of the company growth and the economy of it and the businesses, because truthfully, in a majority of our past videos, that is something I have elaborated on. All the companies, Facebook, Tesla, Apple, IBM, Samsung, so on and so forth, flocking here. And so if you want to hear more about that, please feel free to check out our other videos. But specific to this video, what I will touch on regarding growth is the subject of construction. And so again, nowhere in the country is going to be devoid of construction. That is a given. I'm not saying Austin is unique in that regard. However, in a place like Austin, that was first and foremost just a small college town, not even 20, 30 years ago, that's pretty much all it was in the late 90s and the early 2000s, has now become the unofficial San Francisco of Texas. And I know it rubs a lot of people the wrong way to compare it to San Francisco, but I mean, it's not super Texan, it's nothing but tech companies, and these tech companies are coming from San Francisco, and so are the people. So it is an apt comparison in my opinion. And so with that, Austin, as mentioned, is not a Dallas or a Houston. It's not designed for such growth. And what does that mean? They are always trying to keep up with the influx of people flocking here, and that equals construction all the time. And not even near downtown Austin, not even within the city limits, but for example, Leander, Texas, a hot spot that we've helped a lot of people move to. People like Leander because it has these plans for Northline, the Domain Part 2, a magnificent shopping center that's going to be epic. It's like a 10-year project. Well, yes, that's going to be great in terms of appreciation. People who invest in Leander are going to be happy. People who bought a house for $400 are going to be happy when it doubles or triples. However, that's an example of how Leander is basically going to be under construction, or at least part of it, not all of Leander, but for Northline in the next 10 years of construction. And so that's just one example. Let's not get started on Taylor, Texas with the $17 billion Samsung plant that's in development as well. Things like that. And so everywhere you look in Austin, places that need to boom or explode or pop or that are going to have an influx of people going there for work are naturally going to be with construction a whole lot. It's already relatively bad, but I would expect it to get even worse. And that again trickles down to the traffic, which I already mentioned. Traffic is going to get worse because construction is going to get worse. And when construction's worse, traffic gets worse. It's like a cycle and it never ends because Austin is always playing catch up. And so growth is a great thing, and that is what brings a lot of people here. Don't get me wrong. It could also be perceived as a pro. However, with every pro comes the cons and the downsides. And so that's my job to tell you. And so there you have it. Up next, we have the largely talked about by me subject of property taxes. And if you are a longtime subscriber, I do apologize. I don't mean to be redundant, but a lot of people who watch our videos are new to the channel and they are contemplating a move themselves, wanting to learn more. And a lot of these people are coming from places where they don't really think about the property taxes because they are either 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%. So in the case of Austin, but not just Austin, the state of Texas, property taxes are going to be significantly higher. A lot of people suspect it's because of the no state income tax, which is a great perk, but a lot of people think that it balances out because of the property taxes. And so with Austin being easily the most expensive city to live in the entire state of Texas, in a state where property taxes are already high, in Austin, Texas, naturally they're going to be even higher. Not by a ton, but of course, higher, right? And so a fair property tax rate, a good property tax rate in the greater Austin area can look like something between 2 and 2.5%. However, I'm not going to say that is necessarily common. The truth of the matter is, regarding Austin, Texas, most places, especially if you're coming with a family and you're looking in the suburbs of the different towns outside of Austin, Texas, with new schools, with new roads, with new grocery stores, those property tax rates are often going to be between 2.5% and 3%, which is staggering, especially if you do the math. It can easily look like a second mortgage. And so I don't say that to deter you or to dissuade you, but it is something that, again, on the theme of this video, you just want to keep in mind and weigh the good with the bad if you are seriously thinking about coming to Austin, Texas. On the note of property taxes, I also wrote down affordability. Here's the thing, Austin, Texas, as mentioned, is going to be more expensive than Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, El Paso, Corpus Christi, South Padre Island, Waco, so on and so forth. So much so that the median home price, at least in the city limits, in the urban area of Austin, Texas, is going to be right around $600,000. And don't get me wrong, if you're looking in Hutto, Texas, if you're looking in Manor, Texas, if you're looking in some parts of Georgetown, Kyle, Buda, San Marcos, it's going to easily be in the mid to high threes, sometimes the low fours, the mid fours, and then other suburbs like Cedar Park or Georgetown or Round Rock are going to be closer to $500,000. So the surrounding areas are not going to be as expensive as the city. And a lot of people in our experience do not even choose the city. They like to be close enough within 30, 40 minutes, but they're not going to reside there, such as myself. So that is the good news, right? It is going to be more affordable the further away from downtown you get, as is the case with most places in the country. However, it is more and more expensive. For example, Leander, Texas has a median that is on average between $460,000 and $500,000. Well, in just a year or two ago, that was in the high threes or the low fours. So it's happening very, very quickly, especially as I would predict in places like Bastrop, which is very close to the new Tesla plant. Those homes that were on average in the 300s or 400s, if I had to guess, in a year or two are going to be in the 5s and 6s just because of the demand. And that's the thing. People talk about the bubble, when's it going to become a buyer's market? Even if it does become a buyer's market, Austin is going to be unique in the sense of, yes, it's a buyer's market, but the demand is always going to be here because all the companies are coming here. And so is it more affordable, of course, than California, Oregon, Washington, Canada, New York, so on and so forth? Yes, you get more bang for your buck here. However, don't automatically assume that Austin is cheap. It's relatively cheap, but not overall cheap, at least when compared to the rest of the country and a lot of other states that are not the coast. So the more you know, just something to keep in mind. All right, moving right along, we are now going to talk about the subject of bugs. And I know we just talked about affordability, we just talked about taxes, we just talked about growth, traffic, tents, all of this stuff. And now we're going to talk about bugs. Well, yeah, And it's funny because about a year and a half ago, when we first started this channel, one of my very first videos was trying to find things about Austin, Texas in the spirit of transparency that people won't like, things I'm used to, but things that people might not be used to. And one of those things is, yeah, we got bugs, and I felt kind of lame talking about bugs, but now, a year and a half later, it is still true, and especially prevalent considering the fact that I just relocated myself, as mentioned, to a place that feels more rural, to a place that is surrounded more by nature. And I tell you, yes, it's going to be worse if you are in a more nature type of spot as opposed to pure suburbia or the urban setting, of course. However, they are still going to be around. And so I've been in my place just a little over a week now. And granted, I got a place that faces the water that is very pretty. And so, of course, due to proximity to the water with views, you're going to have bugs more than normal. However, in terms of maintenance, in terms of cleaning it myself, every day on my little railings on the balcony, there are brand new spider webs. Like, I got the broom, I sweat my butt off because we're going to talk about the heat in a little bit. It is remarkably hot this time of year. And so I spent an hour out there using the broom, getting the webs. Sure enough, one day later, not even 24 hours later, they're all back. In addition to that, in addition to the spiders, which have little eggs and nests and stuff, which I'm not super grossed out by insects, but no one really likes spider webs and nests or eggs anyway. In addition to spiders, I have noticed an obscene amount of wasps and hornets. In every crevice, and that's not even proximity to the water. Spiders, yes, that's normal with water, but just by default of being in Texas and being in a more natural area, in every corner of the balcony was a nest. I had to go to Home Depot and buy the spray and stand, however many feet back, 6, 9, 12 feet back, and spray it. And so already a day later, I see more building new hives, new nests. And I realize that's just something that I'm going to have to deal with. Yes, you can pay people to come once a month, once a week, whatever it is, to maintain it. But at a certain point, you just have to accept that is a byproduct of living here. And it wasn't always this bad. Otherwise, other places I've lived, yeah, you'd have ants and you'd have spiders in the house, and a bee would come in, and that's going to be normal. You should expect that, but just be careful depending on where you live. It can be especially bad. Thankfully, I haven't had any ant problems here yet, which I've had in previous years. However, spiders and wasps are my new challenge, if you will. And so that's just something to keep in mind. I even heard someone living close by to me talk about raccoons in her ceilings. Not to say that's a common issue, because that was the first time I've heard it in my years living in Austin, Texas, which has pretty much been all my life. But if you're not used to wildlife or little critters or bugs, so for some people, it's like you want to roll your eyes, like that's not a huge deal. But for some people, it's the end of the world, and that might be who I'm speaking to right now. So again, not trying to scare you or discourage you or scare you away, but there are some things that you just want to think about and weigh when you're considering a serious decision such as relocating to Austin, Texas. Now, real quickly before moving on, drop a comment down below for us to get involved in. If we've been providing any value for you, consider liking the video as it helps our channel grow. Remember to subscribe, and lastly, share our content with anybody you know who's wanting to learn more about living in Austin, Texas. All right, up next, the heat. And this is something I briefly teased earlier in the video, and something that I haven't thought to talk about because it hasn't been very hot here until recently. And so yes, it is stating the obvious. I am wearing my Captain Obvious hat talking about it's hot in Texas. Yes, it's hot. But let me elaborate just to give you an idea so that you are as prepared as possible. Yes, it has not been on my mind because through the months of September through probably April, it's going to be cooler or, of course, cold. In the winters, of course, cold really means 40s, sometimes the 30s, or the occasional blizzard every 60 years. Otherwise, you're going to see fluctuating temperatures between the 50s and the 70s, and then, of course, September, October, 80s, and then back to 80s in April. And so for a brief time, we get to get a break from the extreme heat. But as soon as May rolls around through August or even early September, that's when, boom, it shoots back to the 90s. And then, of course, you are welcomed with triple-digit weather. And if you are moving from the coast or just anywhere that's not Texas, there's no real way to prepare you for the air here. So what I'm getting at is 100 degrees in Pasadena, California, which I lived for a brief time compared to 100 degrees in Texas is going to feel dramatically different. If I'm being truthful, give me 95 degrees in California over 80 or 85 degrees in Texas. Just because the air here, I always use the example, if you're baking cookies and you open the oven and that heat comes out and smacks you in the face, right on the face. That is what it's like to walk out your door in the middle of summer in Austin, Texas, or Texas itself. And so another thing that is ridiculous to measure is when you're in your weather app, I assume we all use weather apps, right? And you're checking the temperature and you see that it's 97 degrees. Well, if you scroll down to the section that says feels like, that's always going to be 5 to 10 plus degrees higher than it really is because of the air density. No, it's not humid like Hawaii or Florida or even Houston for that matter. By the way, if you're considering Houston, it's very humid. It's not going to be that bad. However, it's not going to be dry like Arizona or California. It's a bit of a mix, but it's a mix enough to have that skin start itching and sizzling in the sunlight. So that is something to keep in mind, especially when it reaches 105 degrees. Your app is going to say it feels like 115 or 120 because it does. And that's just something to be mindful of. And another thing to keep in mind is bills your water if you're watering your grass so it doesn't die. If you like your flowers, you water them so they don't die. And of course, you're taking a lot of showers to cool off. And you're cranking your AC all the time because most local Austinites will tell you they love to do all the outdoorsy things in Austin when it's not summertime. Maybe if that stuff involves swimming and cooling off, okay, I digress. However, a lot of people like myself who's lived here my whole life, when it's 100 degrees outside, no, I'm not going to Zolker Park. No, I'm not gonna go even paddleboarding. I'm gonna stay inside, crank my AC, and worry about the bill. And so that's something to keep in mind. Again, I keep saying it, but you got to be mindful of what you're going to be paying every month and just what it is to exist here in the summer, which when it's that hot, it can feel like an eternity. Yes, it's only May, June, July, August, bits of September, bits of April, but it feels like a whole year when it's day after day after day. And if your car is parked outside, if it's not garaged, good luck, because when you open it, you're just going to see these heat waves come out. If you have leather, prepare to get burned. If you have a shifter or steering wheel, your hands are gonna burn. Things like that. Invest in, visors and things that block the sun, or of course a garage if you can. So that's what I'll say on the subject of heat. It's not just that it's hot in Texas, it's a different brand of hot, and Austin is no different. So again, weigh the good with the bad, but that is certainly, in my opinion, the bad. So there you have it. For every pro, you have a con. For every con, you have a pro. Maybe you can handle the bugs, but not the heat. Maybe you can handle the heat, but not the traffic. Maybe you can handle the traffic, but not the construction, so on and so forth. It always boils down to, of course, you. It is subjective, it is perspective, which walk of life you come from, what your preferences are. But hopefully we've done a good enough job of being honest and brutally honest and blunt, at risk of discouraging you or dissuading you, but in the spirit of transparency, because when we are relocating, it is such a big and expensive decision in our lives that we can't really take back. So on this channel, as much as I love to talk positively about Austin, we also pride ourselves in telling it like it is and keeping it real so that you are as informed as possible. But in the case that Austin is right for you, that is what we are here for, helping people relocate here, finding that perfect spot and making that move as smooth as possible. But again, the only way we can do that is by you reaching out to us. So again, don't hesitate, reach out to our team, whether you're 9 days away or 90. Shoot us a text, send us an email, give us a call any day of the week, any time of day. We've got your back. We're moving to Austin, Texas. And again, we put out new content every week about living in Austin, Texas, the good and in this case, the bad. So remember to subscribe if you haven't already and ring that little bell to get notified whenever we put out a new video. Comment down below, like this video if we've been providing any value, share it with anybody you know. And until the next one, you guys, my name is Frank. This is Living in Austin, Texas, and we will absolutely catch you later.